Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you for coming. You're here in the rather sparse offices of the transition as we move into this new form of county government. We're here in the Chicago Title building where we've set up temporary space. We just have 3 or 4 staffers. I want to briefly give you an overview of the last 7 days. It's been 7 days since the election, and I want to introduce the gentleman to my left here and talk about how we're going to try to do things differently. What we've tried to do, the theme that we've tried to have since in the last 7 days since this historic election, is that we wanted to have a transition that was unlike any other transition that county government has ever experienced. So we've tried to be very transparent, we've tried to be very open, we've tried to be very inclusive of people, and we've also tried to set a tone that it is going to be, it is not going to be business as usual in any way. So what have we done to that end? First of all, within the first 48 hours, we communicated with all of the individuals who have been working on the transition and volunteering their time, and inviting them to continue their work and to continue to consult with us in the years to come, because we don't think we have a monopoly on all the good ideas in the community, and we want to include them as much as possible. So that was job number one. We also wanted to include the entire public. We set up a website, again, within the first 48 hours. We set up a website which is onecuyahoga.com, and we're trying to be very open and transparent about the information we provide there. So for instance, every job posting that the new administration is going to fill is going to be listed on that website. It's not going to be a secret. You don't have to know somebody in a place of power to find out what decisions we're making or what positions we're going to hire. That's different than it's been done before, but it's the right way to do it. We ended up having appointing a transition committee of 4 individuals that I think are of absolutely stellar qualifications. Fred Nance, who's a very distinguished attorney in the community, Dave Abbott, who's the executive director of the Gun Foundation, Andres Gonzalez, who is in a leadership position at the Cleveland Clinic, and Sharon Sobel Jordan, who's the executive director of the Center for Children and Families. All of them bring different expertise, represent different parts of the community, and they have been advising us and working with the transition officials and also the current county officials. Speaking of that, as a quick segue to our interactions with them, as you may know, earlier this week we sent a communication to all the current existing officials asking them to join us in not doing business as usual as well. So we're asking them to refrain from any major personnel actions, and I'm pretty confident that that's going to happen on a going forward basis. We have to, but part of the thing that the election stood for was to try to establish a new ethical tone and new standards of integrity. One of the things that I outlined in the course of the campaign was that we would have a very strong and independent Inspector General's office, because it isn't enough to just have a changing of the guard. You have to make sure that the system itself is designed in a way to prevent a recurrence of the corruption that we have seen in the last couple of years. We want to start that process of increasing our ethical standards and then enforcing our ethical standards. We want to start that process in these 60 days or so, now 50 days or so, before the new administration takes office. The gentleman here to my left, I'm going to introduce to you. He's going to say a few words, and then we'll take a few questions. His name is Bill Henterly. He is a 28-year veteran of the FBI. He's in the private sector now. He is a certified public accountant. He has a stellar reputation, and he has stellar qualifications. What I've asked him to do in this transition period is to lay out a roadmap to lay the groundwork for our new ethical standards and start reviewing the processes, again, of county government to make sure that we don't have a recurrence of the disgraceful scandals that have happened in the last couple of years. So he's going to be looking at systemic problems. He's going to be looking at big picture issues. He's also going to be looking at specific instances of misconduct, again, to make sure that we are doing things in a completely different way, an open and an ethical way. So without any further ado, I want to introduce the gentleman who's going to be handling those matters for us in the transition, Bill Henterly. Bill?
Thank you very much. I was approached about this just a few days ago, so obviously I'm not yet up to speed on what we plan to do. However, having had been involved with situations, usually in the corporate arena, where there are substantial systemic and specific problems, I think what my task should be initially, coming on board for the limited engagement I have, would be to just simply examine some of the structural legs of the internal controls which are inherent with the county operations, such as clearly assigned areas of responsibility, adherence to policies, and overall checks and balances, such as separation of duties. When you have a blending or a corrosion or a breakdown of any of those areas, it could lead to problems, I think probably some of the problems we've seen. So that would be my focus initially when we get underway, and I think overall my objective would be just to simply make things easier for the transition when the permanent IG comes on board in January.
Let's take a question or two.
If you don't mind, for Mr. Henterly first. Thanks. Step up to the podium. What do you expect or suspect you will find once you dig a little deeper?
Well, whenever you look at situations like this, you tend to get a lot of rumors, a lot of feedbacks. People start talking. As to what specifically I'll find, I don't know. I assume we'll find something. We don't know. We wouldn't know. Of course, at this point, I can't tell about the magnitude, the volume, or quantify it in dollars or amounts, but I'm willing to bet something will bubble to the surface. Yes?
The county operations, I think, have recently, a lot of it's been gone over with a fine-tooth comb, multiple audits, internal, external. Will you be making use of, previously plowed ground here? Will you be consulting?
Oh, certainly. Any resource which would be available to assist in taking a look at some of the factors, yes, we'd avail ourselves of that. We don't want to replow the same ground.
Might you be a candidate for the ultimate inspector general job?
No.
It's still available, Tom.
Okay. Compensation?
Actually, we haven't even discussed that. I've been a resident of this county for many, many years, and I was asked to help out, and I'm happy to do so. Compensation hasn't even come up yet. It will. But this is a short-term engagement, limited, so.
If people are found to be hired improperly, as you had said, that's one of the things you're looking for. What are the consequences? What's going to happen? Are people going to be fired?
Well, let me answer that. I mean, part of Bill's job is to start looking for potential areas of concern when it comes to that. Now, what we do with that information is going to be up to us, because that's sometimes a complicated legal question, whether or not you have sufficient grounds then to terminate that person. I can tell you, if we find that somebody has been hired in such a way that makes them unqualified for their position, or if they were hired by a process that was completely inappropriate or illegal in any way, as far as I'm concerned, they're going to be terminated. There are a lot of good county employees. The vast majority are great people that have done great work. But for those individuals that have gotten into the system by improper means, they're going to have some reckoning to deal with. But we're going to be very careful about that, because there's sometimes legal ramifications with that.
If you find misconduct that rises to the criminal level, what happens then? Take it to the federal prosecutors?
Well, yes, sure, certainly.
You wouldn't, that would be the only avenue, the only thing that you could do with that information?
Well, any irregularities which we think rise to that level, sure, we'd make it known to whatever agency it would be appropriate to disclose it to.
Was there nothing like this already in place? Nobody making sure that these sort of things weren't happening?
I'll tell you what I don't think it had ever happened before. I don't think you had current county officials that were bringing people with significant forensic accounting and law enforcement background like Mr. Henterly on a day-to-day basis to watch for these things. I don't think that happened. I think there was a lot of self-policing going on that I think was very erratic in terms of whether or not it really worked or whether it didn't work. And one thing to follow up on Harlan's question too, some of it is, I think what we're going to find is going to rise to the level of actually illegal activity, and we'll do what we should do, which is turn that over to the appropriate law enforcement authorities as soon as we find any of that. That's our ethical obligation. But there are a lot of things that are uncovered, even in an FBI investigation, which don't rise to that level. But it doesn't mean that it's not actionable for us to either discipline an employee or terminate an employee. And again, I have to stress this. We want to make sure the system is designed in such a way to make it as difficult as possible for these things to recur. One of the things I learned when I was mayor of Lakewood was we ended up redesigning some of our internal controls to make sure that it was difficult for an employee that wanted to commit misconduct to actually get away with it. So that's things like random audits, it's checking any cash transactions, it's making sure that in the contracting process it's absolutely as open and as fair as possible, that there are a lot of sets of eyes watching the things. These are the kind of things that I think Bill is going to help us uncover weaknesses in the system and then design safeguards to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Mr. Henterly, did you have any involvement at all in the early stages of this, the FBI corruption probe?
No, not in the early stages.
And Ed, did you know him from your service in the FBI or subsequent?
No, I know him by reputation. I worked, my whole time in the FBI was in the Chicago Bureau of the FBI. I knew about Mr. Henterly's work and reputation. Specifically, he was one of the lead agents on the Frank Gruttadauria case, which I know was one of the biggest embezzlement and financial misconduct cases in the history of the local FBI office. And Bill took a leadership role and has been commended for his work in that matter.
Mr. FitzGerald, if I could ask you a question about hirings that you mentioned, improper
Sure.
hiring, things of that nature. Can you tell me, have you promised anybody a position in your administration, and specifically a Steve Lasky, CFO, or anything like that? I know he currently works in the auditor's office.
No. One of the things that we did in the campaign was we tried to be very careful that not a single person was promised a job. And what we've asked the current commissioners to do is not make any hiring decisions that are going to bind the new administration. So I've heard of Mr. Letsky. I've never met Mr. Letsky. I haven't committed to what his situation is. And what I'm hoping, again, is that the new system will let us make those decisions when the time comes.
Thank you.
Okay? Thanks very much. Appreciate it.